I'm Justin Moore, as mentioned, I'm the executive director of something called the Public Design Commission here in New York City. So we like to call it the Quality Control Department for our public works, our public realm, right? So we have this conversation today has been really great because built environment design planning has come up again and again, and it seems to be a movement, as Lynn mentioned earlier, of people understanding the connectedness that our spaces create for our communities, but also for all of our well-being, whether or not that's a social well-being or an environmental well-being. So hearing you kind of mention Trayvon has kind of brought to mind this idea of what is our responsibility as leaders, right? And there's a conversation about power, there's a conversation about time, there's a conversation about ethics, right? Who are we doing this work for? And you mentioning Trayvon reminded me of this kind of incident that happened in Harlem here in New York. I live in Harlem. And there was a young man involved in a conversation about gentrification. And so Harlem, there has been a lot of change. And this young man said, they're not planting all those trees for us. Right? And there's this sort of arc of time of kind of understanding the gap in trust, the rightful mistrust that people have about people in power, about intentions, and about the narratives of places. And so in that conversation, I was sort of telling the young man, well, you do know that like old black lady block associations and people who have been fighting for environmental justice for a long time are why some of these trees are being planted too, right? That the kind of the erasure of the work that people have been doing, of the true power and the involvement that people have had for a long time was sort of taken out by this other narrative that we have to talk about, right? Because the narrative of the new condos moving in and, the white people with their little dogs and the bikes and all of that and buying $1 million apartments became the dominant narrative for why a community was changing, right? So we have to have more conversations about who is this for? Why are we doing that? Who's involved? Who gets to own the story? Who gets to own the change, right? And that's not something that we're very good at talking about because a lot of times the change takes a very long time, or the change happens in difficult ways, and frankly, because there is a lot of failure. There is just failure upon failure upon failure, and we don't talk about and engage in our failures enough, right? And it happens for a lot of reasons: politics, capital, lots of things. But leadership has to engage with failure, right? So we have to talk about those failures. We have to talk about Trayvon, right? We have to talk about, the fact that it took such a long time for this young man to see, the changes in that neighborhood were grown from people in his community, right? So that's just an important kind of point that I wanted to say, since this is about leadership, that we have to talk about our failure and own it. So I wanted to give sort of two examples of the work that I personally have been doing or trying to do in this work. So in New York City government, I'm in this very unique role in that all the different projects being built in New York City come in front of my desk. All right, so New York City, $90 billion annual budget, $10 billion of that is capital projects where the city is constantly being built and rebuilt and rebuilt. So also in Brownsville, there's this wonderful initiative, park project called Betsy Head Park. People in this community had advocated for generations to improve this park. And so the city, very well-meaning, does their community engagement processes and the planning meetings and all of this stuff. You all know what happens. And they come up with a design, and then it comes in front of my desk, and I'm just looking at it. And I'm like, what is going on? Right? All the boxes have been checked, right? We did our meetings, but I know this community. My partner happens to have grown up in that community. And I'm looking at him like, this is not right, right? So I'm in a position of, in theory, power to see that something wasn't right. Frankly, if there were someone else in my seat, there wouldn't have been someone there to see that something wasn't right. So what wasn't right? This is a new park. Finally, we're investing money in this community that has tons of issues, especially with young people. This park was designed to not have much for young people. You know, you all can imagine who came to all those meetings that got the box checked for we did our community engagement. And so luckily I was there in a position to say, try again, right? But that's a conversation about power. You know, it's not just community engagement and activity and let people come up with things. You have to have people in positions of power to check what's going on. And it's very hard to do that. It's, you know, there aren't a lot of pipelines and there aren't a lot of people that reflect the communities or have some kind of deeper connections to communities that have a deeper sense of responsibility and ethics to what is right or wrong maybe for our public investment. So it's just an important thing to talk about that we have to look at our whole systems and structures of power and to make sure that equity doesn't get relegated to community engagement, right? Because that's what's happening everywhere over and over, you know, and it's great to build that, but it's also important to look at the entire system. The other sort of story or anecdote that I want to share is that I also do work in a very low resource kind of context, which is work that I do in Indianapolis, where I'm from. So not billions of dollars of budgets or big power or big government agency, but it's myself and my parents and just trying to do something great in the community that we love. So I started a project called Urban Patch, and actually our very first project was a vacant lot that we crowdfunded $1,300 on IOBI, this crowdfunding platform, to do a permaculture / urban orchard gleaning garden, right? Take a vacant lot and turn it into something that's an asset for our neighborhood. And that was a completely different kind of power than the last one that I just mentioned, right? That was the power of talking to your neighbors, having social connections. You know, $1,300 isn't a lot of money. It took a lot to raise that $1,300, but it was a powerful thing to do and to illustrate that change can also happen in an incremental way. So that was one first project. We met neighbors, connected with people that we hadn't connected with, and have been able to grow a kind of interest in development and capacity in our neighborhood. And we've personally done dozens of projects like these, everything from community gardens to public artwork to buying and investing in rehabilitating homes for affordable housing in our neighborhood. But it's the ability to scale up our work and to have an impact that shows that power can also come directly from people. With that, I'll hand it over to Jennifer.